Welcome, everyone, to Life Beyond 6 Feet. I'm Damion from RKB Paranormal. This week, I'm joined by my co-host, Josh. Josh, what's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
Oh, not much. This is an episode I wanted to do to start out season two, but things happened. We weren't able to do it how we wanted to do it, so we're doing it now for episode 5. And this episode is basically just going to be a year in review for 2022. It was RKB Paranormal's biggest year to date, and we had a lot going on, and I feel like we accomplished a lot last year. So, what about you? What did you think of 2022?
Yeah, I mean, hit a lot of different places, and there were a few that I wasn't able to make it to, but always still, interested in what you guys caught, captured, and went through, and man, the team itself has done great.
Yeah,
Uh,
we lost a member. We've added a couple members. We gained a member back. So it's been an interesting year. So
yeah, absolutely.
and
Had some newspaper articles written up, and
yeah, so it was a good year, I feel. And so to start the year out, 2022, we got a late start. We didn't actually get started till I think it was March or April. We had our first investigation, which you weren't able to make it to. We went out to a community center. They actually reached out to us about coming out there. It was the B.H. Stark Memorial Community Center in Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee. And this one, it was just me and Kelly and our former team member. And it wasn't a super active night, which I think that was partially because we had an audience the entire night.
yeah, y'all had some extra lingering guests that wanted to hang out and see what happened, and
Yeah, which I mean wasn't that big a deal, but at the same time, it was more than I was expecting to be there.
yeah.
Um, and for the most part, everybody was quiet and respectful. There was a few that was being loud and talkative through the entire night. So, and in the memorial center itself, we didn't really have much activity. We had a couple unexplained knocks and bangs we couldn't really figure out, and had a kind of a weird Estes message mess. Estes methods mess. What the fuck am I saying? Estes method session.
Method.
There we go. Um, in in the bathroom of all places. They said that like a lot of weird stuff would happen in that bathroom, and we had some weird things come through, but it wasn't nothing just outrageously crazy. And I
But
remember,
the cool part is we're getting ready to go back.
yes, we are going back here in just a couple of weeks, and I informed the people because they've been wanting us to come back out. I was like, we don't mind coming back out as long as there's not an audience this time. And so I think maybe one or two of them may hang out. If not, we may just be there all night by ourselves. The interesting place there, though, we also have access to an old cabin right across the road, which was actually a transplant cabin. It actually wasn't originally there. I can't remember where they said they had moved it from, but we had went over there, and it just felt way different than the community center did. And so I wanted to do something in there because they didn't say anything about it being haunted. They were like, oh, people say they see weird stuff in the windows, but they didn't really say anything about any kind of activity. I said, well, I want to check this place out anyway. And so we decided to end that night, doing an Estes session. You know, Kelly and Angel was in there, and they were sitting on the bed. I had the camera sitting stationary, and I'm standing in the middle of the room. I got the headphones on and the blindfold and stuff on, and I kept feeling the floor vibrating. This was an old cabin, so you can feel all the movement. And
Right.
I called out a couple of times. I was like, the floor is vibrating. I can feel it. And when I felt it like that third time, I took the blindfold off. I was like, okay, who's walking around? And they're like, we're not walking around. And what was crazy, right before I took, that blindfold off, you hear Kelly ask a question, and then on the camera you can hear this guy. It sounds like he huffs or something, like he's aggravated, right? Like, and then you hear footsteps and you see the camera bouncing, like somebody's walking across the room. And that's when I flipped the blindfold off. I'm like, who the fuck is walking around? And they're like, we're not moving. And I've got that clip posted up on our YouTube page, and you can hear the man sigh. You can hear the 4 or 5 footsteps, and you can see that camera bouncing like somebody's walking by it. And I thought
Yeah,
that was
like
a
he had just had enough of you guys.
Right, like, why the fuck are you in here? Why are you asking me these questions to get out of my house, So I found that really interesting, and I want to spend a lot more time in there this time. Um, like
And
I said,
so we'll have, some some extra members there.
hmm
Uh, so we'll be able to kind of split up between the two locations
yep,
and be able to swap back and forth kind of throughout the evening to see what all happens. So that'll be fun. That should give that place hopefully a little bit uh some more excitement than it was last time maybe.
right. And like I said, we won't have, hopefully, fingers crossed, a big audience kind of watching us the entire time. I don't mind if one or two people kind of hang around, but I
Yeah,
don't.
we're kind of used to that. Some of the curators of the place, they want to be there while we're there, which is fine.
But I don't want to. I don't want an audience like I'm. You know, 6, 7, 8 people just staring at us, waiting for something to happen.
Right. Well, that
So,
kind of kills the energy of the team too, because you feel like you're being watched by everybody, and
uh-huh.
it kind of kills that flow that you've got.
And I felt kind of pressured at the same time. I'm like, they're waiting for this stuff to happen, and it's like, no, it's not like we can make it happen.
Right.
And excuse me, there was one point I done got so aggravated that night that I just kind of stormed off and hung out in the kitchen for about 20 minutes by myself and let the other two, Kelly and Angel, kind of do whatever. And I was like, man, these people just, they want, the people outside is what they kept talking, and they were being loud. And I'm like, I said, they got to stop. And
Well, yeah, because now you've got to worry about cross contamination with your footage and
hmm
everything else, and then you might have caught something really cool, but you can't really explain it, or you might be able to explain it, but then other people are going to look at it. Well, there was 6, 7 extra folks there. It could have been one of them,
hmm
and so then it kind of downplays everything, and it makes showing good evidence difficult when that happens.
right. And like I said, I thought the thing that happened in the cabin, I thought that was really cool because, like I said, I kept feeling that vibration, and for us to actually capture the camera bouncing like somebody's walking and capture the footsteps and this guy that sounds like he's irritated at us. I thought that was a really cool capture. And even though that was really the only thing that came out of that night, hopefully when we go back, here in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to capture a little bit more stuff and maybe figure out who that person was that was irritated with us.
Right.
And because the cabin has an upstairs too, and we didn't really do anything upstairs. And I think Kelly went up there, and I went up the steps and stopped at the top, but we didn't actually do anything up there. We were just kind of checking it out. So, and so our next investigation of the year was your first investigation of the year, and actually our returning team member Adam, it was his first investigation of the year too. And we went to the Gaines house in Gainesboro, Tennessee. And I came across this place on Facebook, the team that kind of allows the investigations. They were posting about it and talking about some of the evidence that they've found and stuff. I was, well, this place seems kind of cool. And then come to find out that some of Adam's family was originally from there, and what was like a great grandfather or something we found out was buried in the cemetery behind the house.
Yeah. So his great 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 grandfather, and I believe he told me his great great grandfather were both law enforcement agents in that town during this time.
hmm
Um, and I know I remember him telling me that one of them actually got shot and killed while on duty from uh, busting some moonshine steals out back in the day.
Right.
And I believe we found both headstones out in the cemetery behind the place.
Yeah.
So
I know y'all found at least one of them because you and him went back out there when it was still daylight. And yeah, I know y'all found one of them.
yeah,
So
yeah, he's got some family and stuff from the area, so it was kind of cool for him. Uh, he had actually had one of his family members actually stay right there in that area, possibly in the house we was at during the Civil War period, as it was a field hospital.
right.
So it was kind of a really cool experience for him to be able to come back to the team and be able to make it to that one for his first one.
Right. And that's initially kind of what drew my attention to the place is because they was like, this was an old Civil War field hospital. It's the only one still standing in town. And, the house is in pretty bad shape. And that's part of the reason they allow investigations. They're slowly trying to restore it and stuff. And it's going to take some work, especially in that one building out back that where the ceiling completely
Yeah.
had collapsed down. But again, it wasn't a super active night for us. We had some interesting things happen. I know at one point I scared the hell out of myself. Walking through the house and I stepped on a creaky floorboard and it, you know, but we've kind of come to expect myself being scared by something non-paranormal. So that always makes for a good laugh. So,
But we
so
did get some good EVPs that night, though.
we did. We got one. Um, when we first started out, we was all downstairs on sitting around that table,
Yep.
and it was actually right when we were getting started. You can hear me say something like, "I just turned the camera on." I'm like, "All right, we're rolling on the camera. It's now we can go." And you hear a guy come through and says, "All right."
Yeah. Just all right.
Yeah, and I was like, "Whoa, that's cool." He's like, "All right, let's go." And and then I know Adam started saying some names of people that he knew,
Yep.
and I don't remember if that really stirred up anything or not. That
No, it was whenever we went upstairs.
hmm
Me and Adam went upstairs and we were asking, you know, were there any other relatives in the house or something along those lines like that, other than Adam. And no sooner than I finished asking the question, we heard what seemed to be a small child, possibly a little girl, say, "Mama, I'm scared."
yeah, and see, that just gave me the chills thinking about that. That one was like clear as day too, and
Very much so.
of course, y'all didn't hear it when it happened, and at the
No.
time, me and Angel were downstairs in another room having like this crazy REM pod activity going on.
Yep.
It was like we had set the REM pod up on this chair that they had said that, a lot of people have a lot of weird feelings and have like some crazy Estes method sessions in the chair and stuff. I was like, well, let's set the REM pod up and just see what happens. We had stood in there for a good 3 or 4 minutes and nothing was happening. I was like, well, let's just walk out, leave the camera rolling, and just, come back in a few minutes. It wasn't no sooner as we stepped out the door, it started going off. I was like, all right, well, let's walk back in here. And as soon as we walk back in, it stops. And I'm like, okay, walk back out, same thing. And then before we walk back in, I'll turn around and I was like, all right, get out of the chair. And as soon as I say get out of the chair, it stops.
Yep.
And I'm like, it's like, well, I want to try to debunk this. I was like, it's an old house. It's like maybe us walking is causing some vibration. And so we both walk over there and we're stomping on the ground and jumping and stuff, and nothing's happening. And walk back out. As soon as we get to the door, starts going off again. And we're like, okay, get up. Stops going off again. And I think the fourth time it happened, Angel had said something like, come on, come get us. We're going to the other room, like chase after us. And it stops again. And it was about that time you guys walked down. And I think maybe it had went off maybe once or twice when you guys were down there. But we captured all that on video, and I thought that was really cool too. That it was more or less it was on command. It was like getting out of that chair.
Now, was it? I can't remember. Was it at the Gaines house, or was it at our next place that we went? Where whenever Adam was doing the Estes method, the cord to the headphones was wrapping around his finger.
That was at Lynchburg's haunted home.
So that was our next one we had
Yeah,
went to.
and seeing he did the Estes method there at the Gaines house. That was his first time doing that, and he thought it was. I think he thought it was pretty cool. And
He did.
and
He really enjoyed doing that. I think about as much as I do.
yeah, I mean it is pretty interesting, especially when you're getting stuff that correlates with the questions that are being asked.
Yeah.
And so and even when it's not going along with the question, just some of the stuff that comes through, it's just like holy fuck. It's like what is this? What is happening right now?
Yeah.
And so, like I said, Gaines House wasn't super active, but we did come out with a few interesting things that did happen. A couple of cool EVPs, and the REM pod action. And of
Yeah,
course,
and
we got to
it was a really cool place altogether.
yeah.
A lot of history and stuff like that out of that house. So I mean, it was still a pretty cool event.
It was, and like I said, we got a good clip for the blooper reel, which is something else we put out last year was a blooper reel, which
Yeah.
like 90% of it was me screaming. So, um, and then you just mentioned our next location, which I don't think we went there in what, late July,
That might have been right. Yeah. Because
and
it was hot.
it was so fucking hot, dude. Oh my God. Like it was cooler outside than it was in the house.
Oh man, that funeral home was, man, it was so hot inside of there.
And of course, for people that don't know, Lynchburg's haunted home is what they call it. It was an old funeral home down there in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and they told us some wild stories of what happened in that place. And the owners had a lot of pets, and they had a little pet cemetery out back, and they claimed that they hear growls and stuff with some of the dogs, and then they talked about the some kid that used to live there who's I
Yeah.
guess was into some really like demonic shit. And I think some of the stuff that goes on there, honestly, I think this kid may have conjured that shit up
It's quite possible.
because
I mean,
some of the
even
stuff that
some of the
happened.
writing,
Yeah,
the writing on the walls in his bedroom and stuff was really, really weird.
and of course, when you walk through this house, you see all these different like Halloween props, and that's because at one point it was converted into a Halloween haunted house. And
Yeah.
so they still had some of the props up in there, not many of them, but they had a few. And that night kind of started out with a bang. We were just kind of doing a walkthrough, and all of a sudden you just kind of like freeze up.
Yeah. That was one of the weirdest experiences I've had. I've seen some other people go through things like that and experience some things, but for myself firsthand, to go through kind of that moment, I mean, it was really different to see the things that I had saw during that, and it felt like that I never really quit moving, even though I did.
And see, we'll kind
Uh,
of we'll kind of give a little quick backstory on how this happened. So we're just kind of starting our night, right? And we haven't really started investigating. We're just kind of walking around, kind of getting a feel for everything. And I've already started, recording with the video camera. I'm like, just in case. And of course, right before all this happens, what happens? I scare the hell out of myself.
yeah,
Um, because there was a random
yeah,
mirror, and I turn, and the light reflects it. And of course, I'm not expecting, and I'm like, oh, holy fuck! So, you know, that after that happened, you and Kelly both are like, there's something weird about this hallway. There's just something in this hallway. And
yeah.
y'all kept saying that. And that's when you noticed in the video, you just kind of slowly, more or less just kind of fall to the wall. And then you just kind of like zoned out. So what exactly happened? Like when you were zoned out, what do you remember?
Man, it was almost like whenever I strolled past that little spot in the hallway, man, it was almost like I stepped into I don't know, it was like a little bit different point in time in a way. Uh, I could see I could see a bunch of people standing down that hallway towards the the parlor way, and all these people were dressed in dresses and suits and stuff like that, and they were all trying to communicate. It was like,
Almost like it was people that might have been in that funeral home at one point by the way they were dressed.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's could have been, and it's like whenever you're standing like in a crowded room with like 30 or 40 people, and everybody's in there kind of talking at one time,
Right.
that loud noise of just chatter,
Mm-hmm.
that's all I can hear. And it's like everybody that was standing there was all trying to ask questions, and I couldn't pinpoint any question because it was just so much. And I don't know, it was just a very, very odd moment and very draining.
And
uh,
didn't you
I,
say it was like almost like they seemed like they were scared?
yes, like it was almost like that was the questioning, was uh, asking questions about things that they were afraid of, but it was just so much. It's like I couldn't make out one single thing anybody was saying.
right? And
And that drain, man, I felt completely just drained afterwards.
yeah, and I don't think you pretty much felt that way the rest of the night. And
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't get it together. I couldn't get my bearings back for a while. Um, a super odd moment for me, and I've never really had that experience. You know, I'm a little sensitive to things inside of some of those places, but that was way different.
as things say, I'm pretty sure that was her first. At least that you shown anyway that we could tell something was going on. And I remember you saying you could hear Kelly talking, but you said it was like she was clear across the house.
Yeah, it was. We were in like two completely different rooms, and I could hear it, but I couldn't pull myself out of where I was at.
Right,
That was the part I guess that got me the most is I couldn't pull myself back through. It was like I was 100% just stuck in that moment.
right.
Couldn't go anywhere.
And you can see in the video, that we have on our YouTube channel that Kelly two or three times kind of shakes you, trying to get you to snap, and you're just not responding. And she's like, "We need to get Adam over here." And so we call Adam over, and you kind of see him. He kind of looks at you like, "What the fuck is he doing?" And he finally kind of pops you on the arm, and it snaps you out of it.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is I never even remember seeing Adam cross in front of me. Like I don't remember ever seeing him or nothing until he smacked my arm.
Yeah,
And I don't know. It was definitely a weird moment for me.
it was, and I noticed, when you were kind of walking back towards a different part of the house, you were kind of holding your back. Well, excuse me, and I was like, "What's wrong with your back? Is it hurting or burning?" And you're like, "No, it's just it feels a little weird." So we pulled up your shirt, and you see like these different like marks on your back,
Yeah,
and like I don't know if like something like scratched you or something grabbed you or what. Well, there was these marks on your back, and you can see in the video, you can tell what's natural like stretch marks and this and that, but these marks were like fresh, like they were freshly pink, like something just walked up and just kind of slashed you or just grabbed you really hard or something, and you were like, that's you sure that's not from work? Because I did some combative stuff at work yesterday. I was like, no
yeah.
man, these are like fresh, like they're still pink, like they're still forming. And that kind of started the night. We stepped outside for a minute to kind of get you out from it. It wasn't even dark yet, like it was just starting to get dark.
Yeah, right.
So we walked out back of that pet cemetery, which was really weird. Like it just, I don't know, it just,
It was a super nice cemetery for pets.
yeah, but
Just
it's,
to say,
I don't know. In my
they
head,
all had their own headstones
yeah,
and stuff like that. Like it was
you know,
really done up nice.
most people, when their dog or cat dies, they just dig them up and put them in a hole, and they may make a little wooden cross or something to mark it, and that's it. But this had their headstones, their names. I think one of them had
Pictures of them.
pictures of them, and I was like, well, this guy really did love his pets, and
He loved his animals.
and so that kind of started our night, and then it just kind of went on from there. Like it was fairly active most of the night.
Yeah,
Whether we was hearing like knocks and footsteps, or it like there was seemed to be something constantly happening.
but it seemed like we had most of that action once we cut the cameras off.
Right.
It
Or
was like as soon as we would, kind of take a break or something like that, that's whenever we would start really hearing it. And it was like,
yeah,
damn it, like what are y'all waiting for? Why you
it
wait
was
until we're on a break?
it was like when we went to the old Scott County Jail that first time, everything seemed to happen when we weren't rolling.
Yeah,
And I know at one point, you decided to go upstairs by yourself. Everybody else stayed downstairs. And
yeah,
and I forgot to mention, Adam's wife Jessie went with us. And
yep, that was her first one.
I think she enjoyed it, but I think at the same time she was kind of freaked out a little bit because she never left Adam's side. I don't think one time.
No,
But she did leave his side once whenever he was doing his S's method. But other than that, she did her own Estes method,
She did.
which I was like, props to you for doing this for your very first time and not really being so much into the paranormal. I think she just kind of wanted to go because Adam was going, but whenever
She
he's
she has gained a liking for it, and I know they're both excited to be able to go back this year as soon as Adam's ready to go again.
right, which hopefully is sooner rather than later, because I know he's with what happened with him, he's probably going stir crazy, and I know he enjoys doing this. And the two investigations he was able to go to, I know he enjoyed himself.
He did, and me and him was talking the other day, and he's hoping within another 2 or 3 months uh, he'll be getting around a lot better, which he does really good, still up moving around with crutches and things, but
Right.
um, he's hoping within the next 2 or 3 months he'll be able to set those crutches to the side and move around without them again.
Yeah, because like I said, it's just I don't he brings a different atmosphere to it, I think. Because
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
we all take it serious, but I feel like he probably takes it the most serious, it seems like. You
Yeah,
know,
because he's really wanting something to go down, something to happen. He's really wanting to prove something.
right. And
So he is like all in from start to finish.
so I'm hoping at some point he can experience something like we did at Scott County and
Oh,
and
absolutely.
actually witness it happening, because he's a big dude, so to see him scream or something like that, I think that would be great. So you went upstairs and I don't think he was doing an Estes method. I think you were just upstairs by yourself,
Yeah, I was just up there sitting.
and you had set up a chair in front of you. You put the REM pod on the chair, and you set up the K2 on the chair. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, I was like, I'm going to check on Josh, see how it's going, because we haven't heard nothing. We haven't heard no movement. Like, it was just dead quiet. And so when I key up the mic, I was like, how's it going? And I heard you jump. You're like, shit. And I told Kelly, I was like, I'm probably fixing to startle him a little bit. And then you were like, oh, it's nothing's happening, but now the REM pod's going off. And I was like, seriously? And you're like, yeah, it's just going crazy.
It
And I
was.
was and I was like, well, I got to come up here and check this out. I was like, I want to see this happening. And as soon as we get upstairs, me and Kelly, and we walk into the room, that K2 goes flying off that chair.
Yeah,
And that K2 had been sitting in that same spot for about 15 minutes.
at least that. Yeah.
And of course, we eventually debunked the REM pod as the radio was causing it to go off, which was a
Yeah,
huge
the radio
disappointment.
frequency.
But
Yes.
at the same time, in my head, I knew that, but I wasn't thinking about it. So we debunked that, but we couldn't figure out the K2 because I'd set it back up there, and I walked around that chair 6, 7 times, bounced up and down, trying to thinking maybe us walking up the stairs and walking in, it vibrated off. It never budged again, and it was cool because we captured that on video. You did, and you said you seen it when it was flying, like it jumped all the way to the red.
It did.
So I
The it flashed all the way up and then came off that chair. And of course, at that moment, it like added that validity to the REM pod going off until we realized it was the radios.
right.
Uh, but still, uh,
It
that
was
in
a
its own was still a good catch.
Yeah, it was a cool capture because we couldn't debunk it, and when you can't debug something and you try and try and try, that's usually what we present as evidence. If you can't debunk it, can't figure out a logical explanation, that's usually what we try to present as evidence. And that was one of those things we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, because even if we're like questionable about it, we really don't put it out there.
Right. So
And
it's like I'm kind of 70% sure it's paranormal, but I'm not 100% sure. So we'll just leave it. That was a cool experience, but we don't know. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is we don't put out every single thing that may happen. Because sometimes we may talk about it as an experience, but we don't share what actually happened because we're like, there's no true um, way to prove that it was paranormal. So we don't share every single experience we may capture. Um, and so that brings me to what you just mentioned a minute ago. Whenever Adam did his SS method session in that kid's bedroom, and
Yeah,
with all the weird writings on the ceiling and the ceiling fan, and had like Marilyn Manson shit hanging on the wall and weird alien drawings everywhere. This kid was weird, and
there was aliens everywhere.
yeah. So it, like I said, and apparently he had a Ouija board at some point because they said they still had the Ouija board. Like he brought it to him. Like the kid's still alive. Obviously he's an adult now, but they said they brought him the Ouija board he used to play with in there.
Hmm.
And they had it, I think, downstairs in that front little office.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And so, we're doing this Estes session. He I have a camera set up and I'm sitting beside him, like asking the questions, but I'm, kind of being quiet because I don't want to be too loud. And he's just getting just some random stuff coming out. I don't think anything was really lining up. And then all of a sudden he just starts kind of freaking out, throwing his arms up. He's like, I'm done, I'm done. I'm like, what just happened? He was like, man, something pulled the fucking cord on these headphones. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, something was tugging on it. He's like, I could feel it. And so he, that was enough for him, which I thought was kind of funny because, like I said, he's a big muscular dude, and I'm like, you know, at first look, you think this nothing would spook this guy, and for him to kind of get spooked a little bit, he was like, I'm done. And so, when I went back and watched the video, you can see you can see the cord on the headphones move just a little bit. And I watched it several times. I was like, maybe he moved, maybe he had a muscle spasm. Like I think I even got it to where I could zoom in on that particular area, and he never moved. No muscles moved. I
No, and
wasn't moving.
the cord like started wrapping around one of his fingers.
Yeah, it was weird.
And that was what got him. He says whenever he felt it moving around his finger is whenever he said that he was done with it.
Right. He was he he was more or less like, fuck it, I'm out of this.
Yeah.
And so, that was a cool little capture. Which I don't think I ever shared it, but because it wasn't. It's really hard to see if you're not really looking for it. And
Right.
so then I want to say we ended our night with your S's message session up in that bathroom.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And man, there was some weird shit that was coming through and that was going on during this whole ordeal.
Well, and there was there was some of the history of it was didn't someone commit suicide in that bathtub that was
I
in
think
there?
I think so. And because I was trying to get you to lay in there, and you were like, "No, man, it's too fucking dirty. I'm not laying in
Yeah,
that."
it was. It was kind of gross in the bathtub. I didn't want to get off in there.
uh, and so you're doing this Estes session, and some of the stuff that's coming through is making sense. And we got the SLS coming pointed on you. And at one point, this little figure maps in beside you. And I'm like, "What?" Kelly's like, "What is that?" I was like, "I don't know. It kind of looks like like a dog or a cat," which adds, validates the stories of these people having a ton of pets.
Yeah, because they had told us that there was a dog uh, entity that they said that they have dealt with a lot.
Right.
Said that where some of the growls and things like that it came from.
Oh,
Even whenever we were,
speaking of that growl, whatever that growl was, me and Kelly heard that wasn't a fucking dog. It the best way she could describe it is it sounded like the Predator growl, off the Predator movies.
yeah,
It wasn't a dog. I've never heard a dog growl like that. Like it was crazy. In that whole little room, that clown room, we was getting all kinds of crazy EMF spikes in there too.
yes, we were.
So
You could even feel like that animal brushing your leg is like it would walk past you.
hmm
EMF detector was going off crazy.
And it was all
Uh,
like at knee level, like the size of like, a medium sized dog.
yeah,
So that was pretty
that
neat too.
that back half was just kind of weird in its own right, which was that's also where they done the embalming and stuff
hmm
like that back on that back end. So I mean,
Yeah.
that just kind of added to it a little bit.
Right.
Uh, we had we'd heard of a lot of like Knox whistles
hmm
while we were back there.
And we could never
But it
figure
was
out exactly where they were coming from either.
no, well, because it's like all the sounds back there just echoed
hmm
all over the place.
Yeah,
And it was really, really hard to get a beat on that.
right. And so, back up to your Estes session, that little thing mapped in, and there, right towards the end, this big, tall, fucking like 7 foot tall figure like mapped in behind you. And Kelly's like, "Holy shit, this thing is huge!" Like it was just standing, just towering over you. And I'm drawing a blank on what happened. Like right after that, like you cut yourself off for some reason. I can't remember what it was for. Like something had came through, or something had touched you, or something. What was it?
Mm. Oh, I don't remember.
Oh, see, I'd have to go back and watch the video, but like you cut yourself off. Like, damn, what was it, man? Something happened because I remember making it like a little clip that I released before I released a full video
Yeah.
because it was something just really interesting. Shit, I wish I could remember now. I don't know. I'll figure it out after we get through with this, and I go back and watch the video, and I'll be like, "Oh, duh, that's what it was."
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Lynchburg's haunted home, man. It was an active night. I don't think everything there's super friendly. I think there may be some not so nice stuff there. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if we per se interacted with it, but something was happening that night, and it all started with you.
Well, I mean, and not only, you got the factor of the funeral home, and then you factor in that, it was turned into a haunted house, and I think people had been in there doing, some satanic things. Um,
And then
but then, there were
the kid
the
doing what he
kid,
did.
the person that committed suicide upstairs,
Hmm.
and then there was someone else that died in one of the downstairs bathrooms too,
Right.
if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think it was the last owner. I think the one who had like a lot of cats. I think they said they found him dead downstairs, but he had been dead for days. And they said the
Yeah.
smell of him and the strong smell of cat urine because they were just
Yeah.
pissing everywhere. So I mean, there was a lot that went on in that house, and it was way bigger than it looks.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm just like, man, this place just keeps going, and so that was what our third of the year, and probably our most active, probably one of our most active ones last year, and then just a few weeks later, me and you went back down to Lynchburg to a place right across the road from the haunted home to the old Moore County Jail, and
Yep.
I don't recall much of the history. Um,
No, it was a cool little place. Man, believe it or not, there was a lot of famous people that would have been in and out of that jail throughout
mhm.
its time of being open. Little Richard to Jesse James, the outlaw, to I mean, it was
Yeah,
crazy.
Jesse James's name was carved into the wall upstairs,
Yep, yeah, because we taken some pictures of that.
and
So
that was another one of those nights. It wasn't super active, but it was kind of just enough to keep our interest peaked. Um,
absolutely.
I know at one point we had took a break and went outside, and we just left the camera rolling. We had it pointing at the REM pod, and we had a K2 beside it. And I went back and I watched this video, and it's like a good 20-minute video of just K2 and a REM pod, and
Didn't we
that
have some like trigger objects out and things like
I
that?
think we had some handcuffs up there, and I think we had some
Some
whiskey and
cigarettes.
maybe some cigarettes. So this whole almost the entire video, the K2's like spiking almost the entire time.
Yeah.
And probably about 9 minutes in, you hear what sounds like a cell door slam shut.
Yep.
And we were outside, and I think actually at the time Ronnie had stepped outside too.
Yeah, because he was standing out there talking with us because it was
Yeah,
pouring down rain.
yeah. So we were all outside when this happened. So that was a neat little catch. Even though it was just audio, it was still pretty. It was validating because you could tell it was a cell door slamming shut.
Yep.
And then we're upstairs in those cells, and what were we doing? We were doing um we did a Facebook live
We did.
or a TikTok live or something of you doing the Estes method. And I remember when I pulled you out, I was like, I'm about to scare him, and yeah, I tapped you on the chest, and you kind of jumped, and of course I think you kicked the bed or something, so the REM pod started going off, but it didn't stop, like it just
Yeah.
kept. And so I thought that was a little weird because normally if he calls it to go off like that, it'll stop after the bed whatever's on stops moving. It just kept going, but I know at one point you because you were using necrophonic and you eventually took the headphones off and we were just listening to it on your phone and like all this weird shit was coming through and like it was cussing at us and all this other stuff and I kept feeling like something was behind us out in that hallway. Like I just kept like there's something back there. And a few minutes later we heard like this beeping coming from the hallway. And at first
Yeah.
we thought it was like a car horn or something because it was like one beep. I was like, that had to have been from outside. And then we heard it again. I was like, what the fuck is that? And then it just started doing it more and more. And we walk out there and come to realize it was our boo bear going off.
Yeah.
And this thing had been up there in the same exact spot out in the hallway for over an hour.
Oh, probably longer than that because we just took everything pretty much upstairs and just kind of set it all in one place.
Right.
And so, we just pretty much just left it sitting there the whole time.
Right. And it hadn't went off one time and then it just randomly starts going off. And what kind of validates that is, I kept feeling like something was out in that hallway.
Yeah.
And so, that was kind of cool. And I remember another part that spooked me. I think you had the headphones on still, but you yelled out, "Hey!"
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and it scared the shit out of me. Oh, and I mean, so like I said, it wasn't a super active place, but we did have those few little kind of neat things that happened. But like I said, I'd be willing to go back, but at the same time, it's not high on my list of places that I would recommend.
Right.
Um, so like I said, I'd be willing to go back to give it a second chance, but
Yeah, because I mean, it was fun. It was still a fun place to go to. Um, there again, some of the history of the place and knowing some of the people that had, went in there and or maybe not willingly, but were in there serving a little bit of time for breaking the law or whatever.
right,
Uh, any jail you come across where Jesse James's name is etched in the wall,
mm-hmm,
that's pretty cool in itself.
right. And so we um we kind of get into the paranormal convention we done. Um,
Yep.
and at this point we had a new team member. Um, because some stuff was happening. We was like, I think it's time we add a new person. This is when Adam had his accident and stuff, so
Yep.
he wasn't able to be going anymore. And so I was like, I think we should add somebody new. And I was like, I think I got the perfect person. And I asked my good buddy Ted, and I've been friends with Ted for over 10 years, and he was super excited when I asked him. He's like, fuck yeah, dude, let's I'd love to do that. And so his first thing with this was actually the convention we did. Um, we did a convention in like mid-October called Phantom Pause and Historic Calls, and it's out in Lebanon, Tennessee, and it was actually way more fun than I was expecting it to be. Um,
It was. We had a good time.
and we had way more people stop and talk to us than I was expecting. Um, so I thought that was really cool, and they're already in the process of putting together the next one. I think they're actually changing the name of it. Um, so I think they're hoping it's
Well,
going to be
we just kind of, or they kind of jumped in and done that for, tried to help out for a good cause.
yeah, and
So, I think that had a lot to do with, the name of the event for last year.
right,
Uh, and I think we raised some pretty good money to give back for the, was it the Humane Society or the Animal Shelter or
They were
something
given
along those lines?
half of it to a senior dog sanctuary, and they were given the other half to a haunted location, and that location was a haunted cemetery down in Memphis.
Yeah.
And actually, the guy who runs that cemetery was there, and I think they said he was going to use the money to get him a new riding mower and stuff to kind of so he could help get the cemetery more upkept and stuff. So because he actually does, he allows investigations and stuff there, but I guess it got to the point where he couldn't keep up with it um, landscape wise, and that's one of the reasons they donated a part of the money to him. So um, I think this year, I think they're still going to give some of the money to a haunted location, but I don't know what their other half's going to be. I don't think they've really decided yet, but I know they've changed their logo up and stuff, and it's like something totally different than what it was last year. So, excuse me. And kind of in between all that, we had our first newspaper article written about us
Yep.
because I remember I had it on display at the convention. Town we grew up in, Dixon, the local Dixon Herald did a story on us, and so I thought it was really well put together. The guy more or less shot me an email, and I pretty much just answered all of his questions, and he worded it really well and was really well put together. Unlike another article that was written about us that was just absolutely terrible.
Oh, it was horrible.
But I'm not going to get into that because that just pissed me off. And also around that time, we were in a magazine for the first time, which I thought was really cool. And I wasn't even expecting to be in the magazine. I had a former, actually a former guest of the show, and we were on her show, the Paranormal Girl, with Kristen and Amanda. Um, she was featured in the magazine about her podcast, and I just reached out to her. I was like, "Hey, how did that happen?" And she kind of, it was kind of an accident with her too. And but I was checking out the magazine online, and it said that you can get your team's name put on the very back cover. And I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna see how you get that done. I was like, that's a little bit of exposure, and so I emailed the editor about it, and she contacted me back, and she's like, hey, we've looked into your team. We would like to feature you guys. And hold up. I was like, do what now? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I think you guys have a really good, a really good backstory, and it's kind of heartfelt and all this other stuff. And I was like, okay. And so, right around that time in October, we were featured with a 3-page spread in American Paranormal magazine, which I thought was really cool. And that was our first time in this magazine. And I remember I had emailed her about being on the show, and she was like, that's not my thing, but thanks for offering. She goes, but while I have your attention, I wanted to run something by you. She goes, the magazine's really starting to take off, and it's becoming really popular, and all these different investigators and teams and podcasts and all this stuff's wanting to be a part of it. So we're going to expand and still do the international and national edition. We're also going to be doing state editions. And she's like, would you like to be on the cover of one of the first Tennessee editions? And I was like, yeah, you know. And so,
Yeah,
once we
like
got
we
a
were going to say no.
right, and it's not so much that we wanted to do it because we wanted to be quote unquote famous. I wanted more or less do it to say, we're the good type of people that do this. We have a good reason behind it.
We're out here. We're legit. We're trying to do things the right way. We're not looking for fame and fortune, and we definitely don't want to put a bunch of bullshit stuff out there just to try to get ourselves that way.
Right. And so I was, that was another way to kind of get people to look at our stuff to say, okay, well, maybe these people are legit because, we put out videos of 20 minutes of pretty much just like the K2 flying off the chair. That was 20 minutes almost of just a camera focused on a chair.
Yeah.
And so we got all that put together, and of course that magazine just came out. That edition just came out. And so after that, excuse me, our next investigation, which is probably, I would say, probably the team's most active investigation of the year. It was one that you weren't able to go to, unfortunately, but it was Ted's first investigation, and it was just me, Ted, and Kelly. We went up to the Hotel Metropolitan in Paducah, Kentucky.
Yep.
And man, this is one I wish you could have made it to because it was hopping all fucking night.
Yes,
And
it got really active with music and stuff too, right?
it did. So, a little backstory on this hotel. It was built in like 1909 by an African American lady, and she built it specifically for African Americans because everything was segregated back then. So, whites couldn't stay where the blacks were, and whites couldn't stay where blacks were, and this and that. And so she built it strictly for black people. And, word got around and stuff. And so a lot of well known musicians over time stayed there. B.B. King stayed there, Little Richard stayed there, Ray Charles stayed there. I mean, the list just went on and on. And when me and Kelly went up a night early because we just wanted kind of, a night to ourselves. And we were expecting there to be an employee that stayed on because it is kind of like a bed and breakfast. So we expected somebody to stay there. And so when we get there, the owner shows us around, tells us a few things, and she goes, "Here's the keys, here's the alarm code. I'll see y'all in the morning." I'm like nobody's gonna be here. She's like, "No." She goes, "Just make sure anytime you leave, set the alarm and lock the door." Okay, well that's cool as shit. And I slept pretty good. Kelly didn't really sleep that well. She said it kept feeling like people was walking up and down the hall, and she said at one point it felt like somebody was just standing at the door, kind of staring at us. And so she didn't really get to sleep that good. And so Ted came up the next day, and same thing. It was just us three there. Um, and it started out kind of dead, like nothing was happening. We're 45 minutes, almost an hour into investigating, and nothing has happened. We hadn't heard a knock. We hadn't heard a floorboard creak, nothing. I was like, well, let's just play some music and see what happens. And so, we played a slower BB King song. It was kind of a slow song, and it kind of started stirring stuff up. And so I was like, well, let's play a more upbeat song. So we played I think it was a Little Richard song, and Kelly has the K or not the K2,
SLS.
the SOS like in like the dining room area. Like when this song turns on, it maps in a tall figure and a smaller figure. Like it was a man and a child. And it was crazy because it looked like they were dancing to the music. Like the man kind of looked like he was tapping his foot, like an older person would just kind of tap their foot. And
Yeah.
it legit looked like the kid was just kind of breaking it down, just kind of shaking and I was like, this is cool as shit. I was like, these are they're dancing to this music. And what makes it more validating, I think, is when that song stops, they both disappear. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if it was mapping in a false positive or this or that, they would have still probably been there once the music turned off. But like
Right.
right when that music stopped, they both vanished. And we thought that was really cool. And later on in the night, we were kind of taking a break, and Ted had went to the kitchen to get him something to drink. And me and Kelly we were taking a break, but not taking a break because we were still filming and stuff like that. And we hear Ted go, "Holy fuck." And so we walk in there, and I'm like, "Man, what's going on?" And we he was like, "Man, this door in here just opened." I was like, "Oh shit." And it was a door that they had said had opened before, and it actually opened on us the night before. We didn't, just popped open in front of us. And then it eventually opened on him again. So this door opened 3 times in the 2 nights we were there, and we couldn't figure it out, couldn't debunk it or anything, and it was really crazy. And so then we were upstairs and we had a crazy SS method session where I felt something poking me on the arm and rubbing me on the arm. And then in the video, probably about a minute later, you hear Ted and Kelly say some stuff, and then you hear somebody whisper, "That's not my name." And that was like the coolest, probably EVP I think we've probably ever captured. And so that was ended up being pretty much the end of the night. And so, like I said, it was a fairly active night, but that music really, really amped it up. And
Kind of made it back in their own time frame as far as where they were stuck in time.
right. And so, when we left the next morning, she was like, you guys are welcome back anytime. Just let me know anytime you want to come back up, you can come back anytime. So that's a place I definitely want to get back to it and get you up there for it. So
Absolutely.
and so then just a couple of weeks later, like I said, we were busy last year. Um, we returned to the old Scott County Jail in Huntsville,
Yes, we did.
Tennessee. Of course, where we've captured our most profound piece of evidence to date of that picture flying off the wall. And so, of course, we wanted to go back there because we wanted to figure out who done that, why they done it. And, it wasn't a super active night. There's little things here and there. But I think probably the craziest thing was when you were doing your Estes method in that hallway. They had told us beforehand, second floor, make sure y'all play some gospel music. They like gospel
Right.
music. So we eventually turned some on, and as soon as it started playing, like I started feeling nauseous. I got dizzy. Like I got so dizzy to the point I had to drop down to my knee so I didn't fall over.
Yeah, you kind of had something come over you really quick.
And then I told Kelly, I was like, turn it off. Turned it off. I was fine. I was perfectly fine up until that point, and I was fine afterwards. And then we turned it back on, same thing. Felt like I was gonna get sick, got super dizzy, and that's when we're like, I'm done with this. Like I said, unfortunately, it wasn't a super active night. That's the only thing I really would call that really stood out that night. And
Yeah,
and
we
that
didn't have nothing else really happen.
and that happens at times, and but
Like,
it's still one of our favorite places. So
oh yeah, I mean, you can't have an experience like we did and not enjoy going back again, even if it doesn't happen.
right,
Cause that jail's a cool place. They've done a lot to restore it and to honor the history and everything. So I mean, it's just a really really cool place to be at anyway.
right,
Uh, whether something paranormal goes down or not.
yeah.
Of course, we would have had another really good blooper moment.
Oh yeah, because that's yeah, because Kelly's sister Julie went with us that night, and she wasn't officially a part of the team yet, but she had been with us because she had been wanting to go with us, and we'd set her up in the drunk tank with the SS method, and nothing was. I mean, she wasn't hardly saying anything, so like nothing was coming through, and I had the camera set up to record her, and of course I forgot to press record, which I thought I did. And so there's nothing happening. So we look at each other. I was like, man, let's fuck with her for a minute. And so I'll walk up and I kind of rub her on the arm. She's like, something's touching me. And so we're trying not to laugh. And I was like, I'm gonna do it again. So I touched her again, and she's like, something's touching me. And of course, we're trying not to laugh. I was like, I'm gonna do it one more time. Then I'm gonna let her. So then I messed with her hair like real good, and she freaks out. Something's touching me, like to the point like I thought she was fixing to start crying.
Yeah, yeah,
And
she
so
was at that moment.
then I pull her out of it, and we're just like laughing our asses off. She's like, "Did y'all do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe."
Well, even whenever you tapped her to like, let her know, come on out, she she still didn't realize what was going on and kind of freaked out over that. And
Right. That was
uh,
it was funny though. So And then so our next one, like I said, was another one you weren't able to go to, which was another active night for us. And before that one, we officially just asked Julie if she wanted to be part of the team. So we added a new member, and Julie is Kelly's sister, and our 15-year-old son Jake went with us that night. And so we went to this old opera house up in Kentucky, and we were having some neat stuff happen here and there. I remember when we were standing up on the stage, Ted and Jake were sitting in the chairs down on the floor, and the other three of us were standing up on the stage, and me and Julie both see this big bright ass ball of light just floating down the aisleway, like it was somebody walking down the aisle. And I was like, "Holy shit!" And she's like, "Did you see that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so that was pretty cool. And then later on in the night, we were back in that same room, and I was sitting in the very back row, just kind of watching them down there do their thing. And I noticed this light that I hadn't noticed before, and I'm like, "Has that light been on this whole time?" They're like, "What light are you talking about?" And they're like, "I'm like that light up there." And the stage was set up like a Christmas theme. Like there was a fireplace and a mantle, and there's a big Christmas tree and a big Santa chair. And so I walked down there and realized one of those candles on the mantle had turned on. And I was like, "Well, that's weird." And so I pick it up and I mess with it, and I realize it's one of those ones you have to turn the bulb to turn it on. That's how you turn it on.
Right.
And I was like, we was up here earlier for 30 minutes walking around on the stage. If any kind of vibration, it should have caused it to come on while we were up here on stage. It's like nobody was on stage at this time. And Kelly's like, "Oh my God." She goes, "I had just said something like, 'Man, it's so dark I can hardly see.' And then this light turns on." So that was a really cool experience. And I think throughout the night, I think it came on one other time while they were in there. And had some little weird stuff happen upstairs, nothing to really write home about. But I think the probably besides the candle and the ball of light, probably the coolest thing that happened to Julie, Kelly, and Jake is they were back in that same room with the ball of light and the candle, and they were getting ready to walk out. And Jake had said something like, "Thank you for your time and Merry Christmas," because it was right around Christmas time. And they said right after that, this loud, like cackling female laugh just came out of nowhere. And it scared them to the point they screamed and ran out.
Yeah, because they could actually like hear it. It wasn't something that y'all like went back and figured out on EVP later. Like they heard it in the moment.
Yeah, and unfortunately, nobody was recording at the time because they were getting ready to walk out of the room. And
Right.
of course, all the outside noise had done died down because it's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and like it spooked them to the point they're like, "Oh my God!" They screamed and ran out. So that was a pretty cool place. I'd like to go back to. So, and it was fairly reasonably cheap too, which is always a good thing.
That's one of those places, just kind of a cool backdrop anyway.
Yeah,
Old opera house, big stage, a lot of history kind of goes along with the place, just a cool backdrop spot anyway.
right. And so that wrapped up, our 2022, and here we are now in 2023. And also, obviously, in 2022, we started this podcast, which is something we had been talking about for a while. And it's
Yeah,
still
and
caught.
you do a hell of a job with this thing. I don't get to partake in the podcast as much, and you've done a fantastic job. You got to speak to a lot of different team members and guests from all over the place, and uh, man, podcast does great, and that's all thanks to you and the time and effort you put into this thing.
Yeah, like I said, it's took off pretty well. And like I said, now we're in season 2. This will be episode 5. And I think when I last checked, it's probably at about 1,500 listens, which may not sound like a ton to a lot of people, but considering we don't have no big fancy equipment or no hot badass producing skills, like I do everything, I edit everything on my phone. So and and what's crazy about it is what I distribute through, it'll break it down, show them where like it's been listened to at. Like we've had people listen to it in England, in India, Australia. And I'm just like, that's crazy as hell. Like, how do they even find out about it?
Yep, bounces out all over the place.
So, So obviously for 2023, we're going to continue doing the podcast. I've got a ton of great guests lined up. Like I said, here in a couple of weeks, we're heading back out to Cumberland Furnace, back to the community center. Just recently found out about a couple of jails, one in Alabama, the old Poly jail, and then one down in Georgia, the old Jasper jail, I think it's called. So, we're looking into them. We've discussed going back to Octagon Hall. Um, I know we want to try to get back to Brushy Mountain. That's one I definitely want to get Adam on.
Absolutely.
Um,
Well, and he's excited to go to Octagon Hall as well.
yeah, and we've talked about going up to Poasttown Elementary up in Ohio,
Yes,
which I've heard is like super active and super super cool location. So we have quite a few places we're looking into. Nothing is confirmed as of yet, other than the Memorial Center, and we did just recently go back to the Old Stone Jail, and it was way more active than when we was there 2 years ago.
yeah, had a great evening up there.
We did a live podcast interview with the crew up there, and then had the girls, all the girls got touched. Kelly was there, Julie was there, Jake was there, and you brought somebody with you. Ashley went with her with us, and all the girls got their hair touched or got their and Kelly's friend Tara went too. So it was a big crowd this time.
Yeah, we had a lot more females, which I think added to some of the activity we had.
Right. And they all kind of got either their hair pulled or they got their hands caressed or breathed on during our podcast interview. Actually,
Yeah,
during the interview, when if you listen close enough, you can hear the girls scream.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. And of course, we was talking to WTF Paranormal,
yeah,
and we was talking about those what the fuck moments.
right. And that was we had one, or the girls
Yeah,
had one.
yeah, right in the moment with them.
And so the craziest thing though, you were doing your SS method upstairs, and the spirit box was dead, so you were using necrophonics on your phone,
Yeah,
and this random song just played out of nowhere, like a half a second clip.
yeah, that's all it was.
And I'm like, what the fuck, And I'm sitting there thinking in my head after the fact, I'm like, okay, if that was somebody's phone, say it just somehow turned on in their pocket, I was like, it would have played longer than what it did, because they would have
Yeah,
had to
because I
take.
mean that was even shorter than like somebody having a clip for a ringtone or
Right.
a text message or something coming through.
Because if it would have been somebody's phone, they would have had to take it out of their pocket, probably unlock their phone, hit the stop button. So it probably would have played for probably 5, 6, 7 seconds at least.
Yeah,
And
I
it
mean,
was just like, like I
having to
said,
take it out of airplane mode at that.
yeah. So I mean, it wasn't even. It was probably half a second of that. And then a few minutes later, you pulled yourself out because you're like, they're saying some really hateful shit, and he's like, I'm just done. They said your name, they said my name, they started spelling out a former team member's name,
Yeah,
and so it was just really weird. And then all of a sudden, we start hearing this staticky sound. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Come to find out, pull it out. The spirit box that had been in my pocket for 45 minutes is going off with dead batteries in it.
yep,
And there's no lights on it. There's no numbers on the screen. Like it's dead. Like we had to physically pull the batteries out for it to stop. That was really wild.
yeah, because we had messed with it for a couple minutes trying to get it to work in the beginning,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't do anything. So that's when we switched gears and went to Necrophonic, which was fine because I like using the app. I think it works really well.
And that
And
was
then just out of nowhere, it's like,
it's
hey,
doing
I want
right.
to start making noise all of a sudden.
And that was another one of those things that I thought about after the fact. I'm like, okay, this thing's been in my pocket for 30, 35, 40 minutes, and I'm walking back and forth. If there was any juice left in those batteries, me moving around, it should have caused it to possibly come on.
Right.
And I was standing perfectly still when this came on. I was, I still can't figure that one out or the song. And
The song was real weird.
yeah.
That was weird.
And so, we ended the night of me doing the Estes method in that same cell you were in. And, some random stuff came through. I think Kelly's name came through. It kept seeing Billy's name from WTF Paranormal. Said his name 5 or 6 times. Um, and then there, right at the end, it just got dead silent. Like no static was coming through, no voices were coming through. And then all of a sudden, I just flipped, and I'm literally crying. in tears.
Yeah.
And you had to come in there and literally just more or less just pick me up out of the chair and take me out because I didn't want to get up and leave.
Yeah, you did not want to leave the room. You were just kind of stuck there. Uh, Heavy wave of emotion,
Yeah, it was.
very unexplained.
I had no idea what that was about. So, but guys and gals, that was our 2022 and the beginning of our 2023. Like I said, 2022 was a big year for us. Hopefully, we can top it in 2023. We're already off to a good start with everything that happened at the jail. So, I want to thank everybody that's listened to the podcast so far, and everybody that continues to support RKB Paranormal. Our family, our friends, and even people we don't know. Um, we do this
Supporting
because
life beyond 6 feet. I mean, that's
right.
huge too.
And we do this stuff because we love it. It's not We're not out here to get famous or to get a ton of clicks and likes. And we'd still do this if none of this shit existed because we're fascinated by it, and we just have all these questions we want answered from when we were kids doing this as teenagers, breaking into houses and cemeteries and all this other shit. So, and I think we're slowly getting some answers, but then turning around and then we're left with more questions. So
More
it's
questions.
right. So. And Josh, like I said, I'm glad you were able to get on here and do this recap of 2022 with me. Like I said, hopefully here and there you can join in a little bit more. I know you stay busy with work and stuff, so I'll get you when I can take you. So,
Absolutely, always around.
all right, man. Well, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll catch everybody next time.
See ya.